but there's been a lot of litigation lately in false marking. And what this is there's a statute that says that if you falsely mark a product with a patent that doesn't cover it, you can be liable for damages to anyone. So I could sue anyone I wanted to if they falsely mark a product. You don't have to have an interest in it. In other words, you don't have to be doing something yourself. So there's been lots of litigation over the last couple of years where consumers or a law firm will find a consumer and they'll sue on behalf of the consumer. And it's also on behalf of the United States. You have to split the proceeds with the U.S. government for false marking. And where this is coming into play is really in every technology you can think of. It's all the way from the shrink wrap that's on the toilet paper, which I'm dealing with a lawsuit right now on, to computer technology, anything that you can think of. But what happens is, if you look at any of those products, on the back of them or somewhere on it, it'll say covered by one or more of the following patents, or protected by U.S. patent number, and it'll list all these patents. And what happens is a lot of times one or more of the patents will expire and they don't take it off the packaging. And if that happens, then you're guilty of what's called false marking. And there's statutory damages. And there was recently litigation that went up to the Court of Appeals that came down. The statute says $500 for each falsely marked product. And it used to be that it was, okay, well, if you did it for toilet paper, that was $500. If you did it for paper towels, that was $500. But the court clarified, no, it's every single product. So if you sold 100 million packages of toilet paper, it's 500 times 100 million packages of toilet paper. So that's why the litigation has just gone nuts. First, anybody can sue. You don't have to have any specific interest. You do have to half your proceeds with the government, but you can get these huge awards. And I mean, it's easy to do. You just go to Home Depot or Walmart, you walk down the consumer products aisle, you pick up a product, you take it home, you look on the PTO website, and you say, hey, one of these patents expired, you sue. And you get money. So it's really become this huge industry of people making money by suing all these big corporations for false marking. And it really opens all these questions for the companies. Well, how do you keep up with that stuff? How do you refresh your product packaging often enough to take the products off? And the reason you mark something with a patent number to start with is if you mark something with a patent number, it's constructive notice is what it's called. And that means it puts the public and others on notice that it's covered by a patent. So then if they infringe, you can get damages starting from when you marked your product. So it's really all wrapped up in giving the public notice that you're claiming or that your product is covered by a patent. So some companies are going to where they're just not marking at all, which raises issues of consumer awareness of what's patented and what's not. But it's really a really tough issue, and there's a lot of cases pending, percolating through the system, and one will get to the Supreme Court. The theory is here in the next year and sort of get that resolved. But it's really been a way that some very small companies or individuals have made hundreds of millions of dollars, really for doing nothing but bringing a lawsuit.
One thing that you mentioned was that certain products would say this is covered by one or more of the following patents. So does that mean, or wouldn't that mean that only one of them had to be valid? So that kind of covers them in case one of them does expire?
Well, more and more companies are going to that one or more instead of just listing them, because that's the argument they're making is, hey, look, at least one of these covers it. But the deal is if you leave an expired patent number on there and you know it expired and you left it on there, then you've got the requisite intent to deceive the public, and so they're nailing you on that. The thing that is most useful on is say you've got, I don't know, it's hard to describe something simple enough. Well, just take a roll of toilet paper. You'd be shocked at how many patents cover a roll of toilet paper. I mean, it's incredible. But we do work for Georgia Pacific. They're in Atlanta, and they sell toilet paper as one of their many products. And I would say that generally a pack of toilet paper we sell for them is covered by at least 6 patents, usually 8. And but some of them cover 2 or 3 different types of their toilet paper, and some don't. So there's overlap, if you get what I'm saying. So maybe like they have 4 types of toilet paper, and there's 30 patents total. So 2 are covered by 16, 2 are covered by 12. You know what I'm saying? And so they put the total number of patents on there, and it may be that only 4 of the patents that are listed out of the 8 cover that roll. But they want to use the shrink wrap, the packaging, for lots of different types of stuff. So that's where the one or more come in. But the key is if it's expired, no matter what sort of the disclaimer language you use about could be covered or might be covered or one or more, you're still falsely marking because the patent is expired.
So just being Joe Consumer is enough to give you standing in that case?
Yeah. And it's kind of crazy because Joe Smith files the lawsuit, and these law firms that make a practice of contingency fee work are going out and finding a consumer and saying, hey, can we name you? Weren't you damaged by this? You don't have to be damaged. And they say, yeah. And so they sue these huge corporations for false marking. And even if the company, and there's two aspects. You have to falsely mark, which you can tell pretty easy. You get the product, it's got a patent number on it, the patent expired, it's falsely marked. But there is a second prong. You have to have an intent to deceive the public. That's where most of the companies are getting out of it. But if you can show the company knew the patent expired and they kept marking it, that raises a presumption and shifts the burden to the party who falsely marked to say, hey, we knew it expired, but we had all this product in inventory. We changed the product packaging immediately, but it took us 6 months to sell that off before we could roll the new product out. Or, you know, there was a big case, the Solo cups. You know, the Solo cups, everybody drinks their beer out of them. If you don't want to get caught, you pour it in there so you can't tell what you're drinking. So those are made with all these molds. And it takes a while to make the new mold. You know, so they figured out, in fact, in that case, it took them 10 years to get a new mold. They said, oh, the patent expired, we should get a new mold. Well, let's not order a new mold because they're really expensive. Let's wait till the one we've got wears out. When it wears out, we'll get a new mold, and this time we won't put the patent number on it that expired. And the court ended up finding that that was legitimate because it can't cause a company such undue business expense. It can't be so unreasonable that you're expected to just, like, you know, burn a ton of inventory. But the long answer to your question is yes. It could be any consumer, and the contingent fee law firms are finding a consumer, naming them as the plaintiff. The only caveat is because it's in the public interest that you bring the lawsuit, you have to split the proceeds with the government. And most of these cases are settling. So you sue Coca-Cola and you say, look, we'll settle for $500,000 and the government's going to get half, you're going to get half, but you really haven't had to do anything. You have no investment other than your attorney's fees, they're going to take a third of what you get. And then it's just milking the companies, you know, sort of, they're getting sued by lots and lots of people. One caveat is you can't, not more than one consumer and the government together can sue the same company for the same product. So if the company resolves the litigation with a consumer and the government and makes sure the government is a party to the case, they can't be sued again on the same fridge pack, for example. But you know, most of these large consumer companies have hundreds of different packaging products. I mean, hundreds of different products, and many are packaged in different ways. Even within the U.S., Coke has different packaging for products that are sold in the Southeast than are sold in the Northwest. And they'll have different labels on them. That one's a little easier. I think the corrugated, it's easy to change the screen on and move the patent numbers off. The harder things are where it's imprinted into the product from a mold. You know, that makes it pretty difficult. So anyway, the false marking stuff is something that you may hear about. The non-practicing entity impact, and if any of you have watched much of what's going on in the patent world, you may hear these people called patent trolls, and that was a term that was coined by the Patent Council at IBM. But what's happening here is there's a growing number of companies who are not manufacturing anything. They're not really in industry. They just go out and they buy up a bunch of patents, mostly from individuals. They look at the patent office records. They find patents that somebody holds that they're not doing anything with that arguably cover something. They buy them up and then they go sue everybody in the industry. One of the big non-practicing entities, which is the nice name to call them, that's what we call them to their face, but we really call them patent trolls because that's what they are. They're just like a troll at a bridge. They have no stake, no interest, and they're just blackmailing people, essentially is what they're doing. One of them is called Acacia, and they are probably the largest non-practicing entity as far as holdings. They hold over 10,000 patents, and none of them did they invent. They just bought them from other people. They sued a bunch of our clients, 108 defendants in Atlanta on a patent, a single patent, and it claimed to cover it claimed to protect against the fraudulent use of credit cards in electronic transactions. So in other words, you go into, name any retailer. I mean, you know, A&F was in it, FedEx, Macy's, I mean, anybody that sells anything, Borders, they were our client. Anytime you go in, you swipe your credit card and you get a receipt. So the patent said, well, if the receipt doesn't if the receipt has a transaction number on it, that you can trace the transaction within your electronic system, then you infringe our patent. Well, I mean, that's arguably every retailer in the United States. And that's what they're doing is, how they're making their money is, instead of really suing and pursuing the case all the way, they're trying to settle this. So they sued 108 defendants, and their goal was to get between $100,000 and $300,000 from each one. So that's a whole lot cheaper than the cost of litigation. So you know, a company, a big corporation, analyzes the litigation. They say it's going to cost us $2 million to defend or $100,000 to get out now. Should we play the blackmail money or should we stick in it? And companies have different philosophies on that. A lot of publicly held companies cannot justify expending the cost to defend themselves if they can get out for so little. The problem is as soon as you get the reputation that you pay, then the list of people that are suing you just grows exponentially. So, for example, one of the companies we were representing in that litigation was FedEx, and FedEx has a policy that if there's a colorable claim that they infringe, then they'll settle, and they'll settle for a reasonable amount of money. But if they are, you know, pretty assured that they do not infringe, they will not settle and they will fight. And they've done it to, you know, they've been able to get out for $100,000, $200,000, and they've spent several million defending themselves against the patents. So that one turned out really well for us because we got a claim construction, which is construing the claims of the patent to see how they're going to be read on an alleged infringing device. And we got FedEx out for free. Even they could have gotten out for $100,000. They spent actually less than that defending themselves in our case because we didn't have to go to trial. But that's another thing that I guess you could look at from two ways if you're an entrepreneur. If you come up with a patent, if you come up with an invention and you get a patent on it, but you don't have the money or the interest in commercializing it, you can, in all likelihood, sell it to a non-practicing entity and have them enforce it for you. And you can work out relationships with them where you get a third of the proceeds from everybody they sue, or they just buy it from you up front for whatever price, you know, you can negotiate, and then they'll go out and sue everybody on it. The only thing I'll caution you is be careful, because if you're the inventor on that patent, you're going to get deposed lots and lots of times every time they try to enforce your patent. But it's a way to commercialize your technology if you can't do it yourself, which is getting it over to a non-practicing entity. I would strongly advise you to look at somebody who's actually going to practice it and use it first. But sometimes those companies are not as interested in purchasing somebody else's technology. They'd rather have their own. Non-competes versus trade secrets, that's the thing that I was talking about that we've seen more and more as the non-compete laws change in the states. And there seems to be a general policy that the states are making it harder to enforce non-compete agreements because they're trying to spur innovation and people having the ability to move around, particularly with all the layoffs and everything that's gone on across all different types of technology companies. But the thinking is that, you know, look, you've been laid off